Hello and welcome to another Bottled Sky dev video. Last video I created a crafting system for the game and discussed lots of different features I've seen from other games and why I may or may not want to include them. This video I am back to recapping this month's progress, which includes the hub storage feature and the first enemy along with a combat system. The crafting system was also done this month, but I'll leave that out since I've already made a detailed video on that. So what is the hub storage feature? As you engage with the game's systems, you will collect lots of items. These items get stored in an inventory which has a limited amount of space before it can hold any more items. The hub storage feature gives the player a place to store large quantities of excess items. Why not give the player a bigger inventory, you might ask? I want to encourage the player to regularly visit the hub, which is a physical location in the game world that you must travel to and from. The hub will be used for lots of activities like upgrading and modifying your shuttle, story beats, saving your game, restoring your health, and more. If your inventory is full, then the player's choice from then on is to either return to the hub to clear up their inventory or to be more picky about what they keep and leave behind. If this doesn't happen, then the player has little reason to return to the hub. Thankfully, the storage feature itself will be easy to add because it's just a larger version of what's already been made for the shuttle. The tricky part about developing this feature is the hub. The hub doesn't exist yet, so I need to add some new prerequisite tasks that need to be done before this can be completed. The first task is an interaction system. By that, I am talking about the interact button prompt that you get in games, but it does something different depending on what object you're interacting with, such as reading a sign, talking to an NPC, flicking a light switch, and so on. The hub is a space station you board. To board it, you need to interact with an object. This will probably be a hatch or entrance of some kind, but the visuals don't matter just yet. So that's what I'm going to work on for now. Okay, that is the interaction system finished. The shuttle can only interact with an object if it moves into a certain area, and then the player can press a button to initiate the interact action. There will be an object located at the center of that area, like a signpost, a door, or an NPC, but it's not required. I've also accounted for the possibility that multiple interaction areas might overlap, and the shuttle could be within range of more than one object to interact with. Based on solutions I've seen in other games, I decided to handle this by having the first encountered interaction area be the priority target, but also allow the player to press a button to cycle through any other valid targets. This might change. I might decide it's better to prioritize based on distance between the shuttle and the interactable object, or prioritize based on a number that I would manually set for each object. It depends on how the game turns out later in development, but for now, my current solution works just fine. I've set up a blank circle that is interactable, and interacting with it will load you into a different scene. Currently, that scene is blank, so I'm going to set up some quick inputs that will allow me to store the contents of the shuttle's inventory into a larger inventory, and also to leave the hub and load back into the space scene. I'll collect a few items, go into the hub, click this button to stash my items, and... Wait a minute. What do you mean my inventory was empty? In Unity, when you move from one scene to another, any objects that existed in the previous scene are destroyed, and the objects that exist in the new scene are created. That includes the shuttle and its inventory, which brings me to the title of this video. Thank you for clicking on it, by the way, that's very kind of you. I hope you're enjoying your stay. I need to build a saving and loading system for the game. When you interact with the hub entrance, before I load the new scene, I need to save all the relevant data from the current scene. And then when I stash items into the storage, I need to load data related to the shuttle's inventory. Consequently, I will also need to save and load data related to the hub scene. Otherwise, the entire storage will also be wiped every time I leave the hub. I'm not just saving data about inventories either. I'll need to save data about all the entities in the space scene too, such as the positions, rotations, and momentum of all the asteroids. Turns out this is not an easy thing to do. There are plenty of tutorials on building save systems in Unity, but they all assume that the objects you want to save and load will always exist in a scene. But in Bottled Sky, most objects are spawned in after you start the game. This problem took a couple of days to wrap my head around, and I didn't stream or record any of it because it's just hours of thinking and testing. Serialization is a headache, but I finally got where I want to be in the end. Now I can collect items, go to the hub, stash the items, return to exploring, and everything works as you'd expect without data being wiped. The hub storage feature is complete. Next up is creating the first enemy. Combat will be real-time action and physics-based, in the same way that gathering and exploration is. Entering combat will be seamless, meaning there is no visual transition between before and after entering a combat state, and it can happen at any time while in space, to push the idea that you aren't always safe when exploring, but you aren't forced to fight. You can leave combat by just outrunning the enemy. The player already has the means to deal damage to enemies, by which I mean that I plan to reuse the asteroid drilling mechanic and allow you to drill most entities you encounter. That won't be the only way to fight enemies, but I'll work with just that for now. I've planned out the behavior of the enemy. First, I'll make the wander state, which is where the enemy roams around acting like a part of the ecosystem, rather than some machine-controlled monster that always attacks the player as soon as it sees you. Since I'm saying that it's part of an ecosystem, I'd like to move away from calling it an enemy, because that implies it's always in opposition to the player, when in reality it might only attack or flee if it feels threatened. From now on, I might refer to enemies as animals or wildlife, unless otherwise appropriate. In this case, this animal roams around feeding on asteroids, and it gets upset when you break asteroids that are nearby. It will attack you because it sees that action as stealing food that it wants. So now that we know when to transition to a combat state, let's define how it fights you. The animal has a ranged attack where it spits rocks at you. Eventually it will run out of rocks to spit and move to the nearest asteroid, latching onto it. After a few seconds, the asteroid is consumed, and then can resume spitting rocks at you. As you can see, the combat state is not just one state, but a series of states. It will not keep repeating this cycle until you defeat it though. Eventually it will flee if it has taken enough damage. If the player tracks it down and defeats it, you will get some unique loot, but killing all the wildlife is not the objective of the game. I don't just need to reward players for defeating enemies, I can reward them for being able to just defend themselves, and because of that I've got one more feature I want to add to this animal. As soon as the animal begins fleeing, it will drop a unique item that disappears after a set amount of time, but also takes some time to pick up, giving the animal ample time to escape. The player has a choice to collect the item and miss out on finishing off the animal, or leave the item for an opportunity to finish off the animal. You can't have both. Later, I may end up creating a tougher Phase 2 AI for the cornered animal to give some additional risk versus reward factor to this choice, but for now this is an interesting addition to the game that is plenty of work on its own. Okay, I've got an object that can seek out asteroids that are roughly nearby. I'm using the world chunk and entity management system to do this, rather than doing a distance calculation for all the asteroids, so it's much more efficient for performance. But it also means that it's not always seeking out the exact nearest asteroid. For now, I'm okay with that. I can justify that the animal goes after food that catches its eye. But if I wanted to change that behavior, then I can combine those two methods at a smaller cost to performance. I'm not satisfied with how the movement looks at this stage. I just put something together to make it work, but later when we're working on the visuals, I'll rework the movement too. I also reused the drilling code that I built for the shuttle to create its ability to eat asteroids. With that, the object can latch onto asteroids and gradually damage it. Just these two features took a few hours. I expected that making the core behavior of this enemy might take a couple of days, but there's still plenty to do and I might be falling behind on this estimate. We'll see how it goes. Day 2, I got about the same amount done with less time, so progress is steadily increasing. I don't work on this full time, which is why I'm only doing 2 to 3 hours here and there. Making these videos takes a fair bit of time too. At this point, the wandering state is finished and I've started working on combat. If the shuttle destroys an asteroid nearby, then the animal enters a combat state. During the combat state, it will move to within a certain range of you, but it also tries to keep its distance and backs away if it's too close to its target. It doesn't have to target the shuttle. If another animal breaks an asteroid nearby, then it might attack that too. This is to make it feel like this really is an ecosystem where wildlife competes for resources, and I thought it would look cool to stumble upon two animals fighting for this reason. Like I said earlier, I'm not satisfied with the movement just yet, but this is good enough for a proof of concept. On day 3, I made a projectile system with object pooling, and a basic projectile that is just a fast-moving pellet that travels in a straight line. I've attached a projectile spawner to the animal, which is controlled by some logic that only shoots when the animal is within a certain range and is roughly facing its target, and also has cooldown between shots. This was pretty difficult to test because of how the animal's momentum made it swing around wildly, so I did some work on the movement. I decided to decouple the shuttle's movement from its logic. In non-programming terms, that means that the shuttle's physics is no longer associated specifically with the shuttle, and now can be applied to any object. The shuttle still decides which direction to move in based on cursor position and when to accelerate based on button input. Meanwhile, the animal has its own logic that decides when to move and rotate. Overall, this will probably have the unintended consequence of making it easier for players to understand how the animal physics will work, since it's similar to the shuttle's physics. On day 4, many more tasks were completed, although they were easier to do. The animal now has an internal ammo count for the rocks it's spitting out. When it runs out, it has to eat an asteroid to refill its ammunition, or it can continue fighting. I did this for 2 reasons. The first is because it makes contextual sense that it won't have an infinite amount of rocks in its mouth to spit at you. The second reason is that it provides a clear opportunity of weakness for the player to take advantage of when fighting back. If the enemy has a clear weakness, then that gives me some room to make parts of the fight more challenging. The best part about this though is that I didn't have to write much code at all for this ammo refueling behavior. I just reused its wandering behavior until it has eaten 1 asteroid. On day 5, I put my head down for a few extra hours and got a bunch of tasks done related to allowing the player to use the drill ability to interact with the animal. The animal also has another attack that helps it break free from your drilling ability. This was necessary because otherwise the fight would be over as soon as you land the drill once. I spent a while creating a new system that allows me to spawn zones that apply effects to anything it hits. For example, the animal's repel attack temporarily spawns a zone that stuns, knocks back, and spins the shuttle, which gives the animal enough time to reposition and continue the fight. All that's really left now is the fleeing state. Day 6, I finally finished all the remaining tasks for the animal. The fleeing movement was easy enough to code, just figure out where the attacker is and go the opposite direction. Then, if the animal stays far enough away for enough time, then it disappears and you can no longer find it. The item it drops when it starts fleeing took a little bit of extra work. I hadn't yet made it possible for an item to just exist in the world for you to pick up. Normally, if you destroy something like an asteroid, the asteroid recognizes what destroyed it, spawns its loot, and tells the loot to go towards the thing that destroyed it. In this case, the animal isn't dropping loot to its attacker, it's just dropping loot for anything to pick up. To do this, I was able to make changes and build upon the interaction system I made earlier. This task isn't fully done yet because the item can be picked up instantly and I wanted it to take some time. But I decided not to prioritize this since I'm getting close to my self-imposed video upload deadline. The enemy also now has a loot table that it rolls on when you defeat the animal, but I didn't create any new items for this just yet. I'll come back to this another time, as it's also not that important until the game has some more context. This day was also very productive because I also got the next task done, which was to give the shuttle health and allow the shuttle to be damaged by the animal's projectiles. I reused the effect zone system I made earlier, and now the projectiles are effectively moving effect zones that damage the first thing it hits. Another part of this task was making the medkit item actually heal you when you use it, so I needed to build another system to allow for that. Thankfully, I was able to just build on top of the effect zone system again, and just remove the zone part of this system. Currently, the shuttle will automatically use any medkits you have in your inventory when you drop below 50% health. I'm not certain yet if I want to have items be used automatically. On one hand, it makes the game much more accessible, but on the other hand, it removes a choice the player can make. Although healing when your health is low is generally a no-brainer. I could make this into an upgrade you attach to the shuttle, but since that system doesn't exist yet, I've still got some time to think about it. And that concludes version 0.1 of Bottled Sky. I now have a minimum viable product. It's not pretty, but it's got many of the core mechanics that you will interact with for the entirety of the game. I do have a short list of extra tasks which consists of minor bugs I've found or small features that I didn't prioritize. I'll be sorting those out before I begin work on version 0.2, but other than that, the game is ready to start getting some polish. Polishing a game typically involves lots of creative disciplines to make stuff including art, animation, music, sound effects, shader coding, particle effects, and much more. I'm confident in my own ability to do a lot of these things, but art and animation is a big weak point of mine. I mentioned in an earlier video that I am not the only one working on this game. The creator of the YouTube channel Max Ham was responsible for much of the art and animation of the first version of Bottled Sky, and I've worked with them professionally before that. They will be responsible for the entire art direction of Bottled Sky, and it will likely look very different from the clips of the first version of Bottled Sky that I showed earlier in this series. So far, there have been no new assets made for this new version of Bottled Sky, but they've been helping out by making the thumbnails for these videos, and they're ready to get stuck into making some new stuff. I don't know how long it will take exactly, but as usual I will show off gradual progress with each video. The next video might be a little lighter on content because this has been a long and busy month. I still have that bug list to sort out. If you got this far, then consider liking the video, subscribe, and bell to be notified of future videos. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in Bottled Sky. Thanks for watching, that's all for now, and I'll see you later.